In the fall of 1948, the Presleys left Tupelo for Memphis, Tennessee. Now, this automobile is the same type and same model that the Presleys had to take them to Memphis in. Now, this automobile is at the Elvis Presley Museum in Tupelo, but it's not the real vehicle that they went in, but it is the same make and model. Now, in the middle of the night, the Presleys loaded up their vehicle and lit out for Memphis. And the reason they left in the middle of the night is that Vernon owed so many bills that his idea was he didn't want anybody to know he was leaving town to start with. So his idea was to go to Memphis, get a job, and be able to come back to Tupelo and pay off all of his bills. He knew he couldn't do it if he stayed in Tupelo. Now, this is the old Highway 78. This is the exact highway that the Presleys traveled through the night to Memphis to make a new life for themselves. And of course, they had no idea what a change that was going to be. They reached Memphis in the early morning hours of the next morning, and for the first 7 or 8 months, they lived in boarding houses, which were cramped and really quite miserable for them. But then Gladys put in, she heard about the Lauderdale Courts, and so she put in for an application form in September of 1949, and she was approved 2 or 3 months later. And this is the Lauderdale Courts today. It's at 185 Winchester Avenue. Now, this is one of Elvis's teenage pictures that he took while he was living at the Lauderdale Courts. And this is another one at the Lauderdale Courts. Actually, Elvis spent all of his high school life here at the Lauderdale Courts. Now, the Presleys lived in apartment 328. And you can tell now by looking at the courts that they have been renovated. And at that time, it was a low-income housing project. Now, this is looking out the Presleys' the window, out into the street from their apartment. And of course, you can tell this was years later after they had moved out. Now, if you look at this picture here, you can see the windows are open, and the reason is that they didn't have any air conditioners. And this is one. It was years later when the apartments had become and were closed up actually and become just almost dilapidated. And then what happened was the city of Memphis decided they wanted to move people into the downtown area, so they renovated the whole courts. And now, of course, after they renovate them, it is a high-end rental district, and the courts is a gated community. Now, the Presleys stayed here in the courts from 1949 until Elvis graduated high school in 1953. Now, this is a picture of the way it looks inside the courts now. Now, this apartment 328, this is the one that the Presleys lived in. Now, at that time, this was really an upgrade for the Presleys to be able to get out of the rooming and boarding houses that they had been living in. Now, although they didn't look quite as good as as this is, because there were so many families moving in and out. But they were clean and they were nice to what they were used to. Now, they've made a little museum out of the Presleys' apartments here. And somebody said that you could actually pay and spend a night in their apartment. I don't know if you still can do that or not, but you used to be able to. Now, the high school that Elvis went to at Humes wasn't very far away. So all the boys that lived in the courts, there were several families that lived here. It was just like sort of a little community. And Elvis met other boys that lived in the courts that could play their guitars and things, and so they would sometimes get together, and they would go to each one of them's apartments, to their houses, and play. And sometimes they'd just sit out on the sidewalk or the steps and just play for anybody that wanted to sit and listen. You can tell that these are high end. Now this right here was a laundry room, and that's where everybody come to wash their clothes at one time. Well, Elvis would come down there and play and sing by himself, and the reason was he wouldn't disturb his neighbor down there. You could beat on the guitar as long as you wanted to down there, and nobody wouldn't hardly hear you. And so a lot of people said they would go in there and Elvis would be down there playing. Now this is actually Humes High School, where Elvis went all of his years in Memphis. Now it says Humes Middle School, but actually it was the high school at that time. And this is the way it looked. First day that he went to school down here, I think Gladys walked him to school, but she said it wasn't because Elvis was scared. It was because she was actually afraid that he would skip. Now the Humes High School is located at 659 Manassas. Now it is a huge school because it had a middle school, a high school, a middle school, and sort of a grammar. Then this right here is a picture of Elvis and some of his friends at Humes. Now he made friends in his the 11th and 12th years, probably more than any other time. But some of the friendships that Elvis made in his high school years, he actually kept the rest of his life. Some of the Memphis Mafia were just simply high school buddies of his that went to Humes. Elvis said he wasn't popular until finally in the last years or so of high school they had a talent contest, and he brought his guitar and he started playing and singing, and once he was in the talent contest, it surprised everybody because the kids at school didn't know that he could sing and play. And he said, boy, he really became popular after that. Now this is one of his school pictures, and he's in the right upper hand corner here, and you can tell he don't look any different really from the rest of his class, although a lot of people have made a lot of noise about him looking so much different and what have you, but not to look at his pictures, you can't tell it. Now this is one thing else that he had to sort of stay in line because Humes and the city of Memphis had ROTC units, and so Elvis had to be in the ROTC, and this is what helped him years later when he was in the military. This is Elvis's graduation picture. Now be sure and go to part 3, because this is where we go to the first house on Audubon Drive that Elvis bought and lived in after he made a lot of money.